friends! Welcome back to my channel. This video, I wanted to take you through my journey of making a wonsam. This project began because my bosom buddy Ivy and I accidentally started a tradition of making matching ensembles for Friendsmas. Last year, we made red and green 1950s cocktail dresses. I might have had too many mimosas. Anyway, this year we decided to also make red and green historical ensembles, but kept the time period a surprise. I went back and forth between what decade or even what century to do. And then I had a light bulb moment to make a historical Korean gown. It's something that I've always wanted to do, but never had the courage to try. Little did I know how significantly this idea would affect me emotionally, but I'll get into that later. Settle down, settle down. Why hello there, I am Professor Inky, and welcome to I'm Not Actually a Professor, I Just Love Old Clothes 101.
Imagination.
Today's lecture is all about wonsam. A wonsam is a ceremonial topcoat with sleeves of multicolored stripes that would have been worn by royalty, high-ranking court ladies, and noblewomen during the Joseon dynasty. In the early Joseon dynasty, wonsam would have been worn exclusively for state ceremonies. However, over time, commoners could also wear wonsam for their weddings. Wonsam is believed to have originated from tansam, an unlined jacket from the Ming dynasty in China. Korean empresses or queens would have received exquisite tansam when they ascended the throne. It is generally accepted that in the middle of the Joseon dynasty, the shape and name of the tansam changed to the wonsam we know today. During my research, I often found the term empress or queen interchanged. This led me down a merry tangent to figure out why. It appears that Korea's monarchs have been called emperors or kings and empresses or queens, depending on the strength of their relations with China at the time. Since China's court did not tolerate any other sovereigns calling themselves emperor or empress, other rulers had to demote themselves to king or queen during times of strong Chinese influence. Anywho, if I alternate between saying queen or empress, now you know why. Yeah, this is just a random book. I started by taking measurements from a hanbok that fits me well. This hanbok was actually a gift from my saeonni for her wedding. Isn't it so pretty? Because I've never made a hanbok before, I wanted to take these measurements to help me design good proportions for my wonsam. Next, I took measurements from my reference image. This particular wonsam dates to the early 20th century. Once I had these measurements, I scaled them up by using math. I know, I won't bore you with too much info. All you need to do is divide your reference's measurements by your actual shoulder measurement. This value is what you need to multiply your reference measurements to convert to your actual measurements. If you don't have a hanbok for reference, you can simply use your own shoulder measurement and add about 2 inches for ease. After you have your measurements, don't forget to add seam allowances to the side seams on the robe and the sleeves. I used 1/2-inch seam allowances here. These measurements will be your pattern. Once you have your pattern, you'll need to cut out the body pieces and sleeves in the outer fabric. I used a really pretty brocade with gold metallic threads. Traditionally, wonsam would have been made with silk, but I went with a much more affordable polyester option. If your fabric is wide enough, you can cut the front and back body of the wonsam in one piece. My fabric wasn't quite wide enough, so I cut and sewed the front and back pieces at the shoulder seam. For the stripes on the sleeves, I chose this gorgeous gold brocade to complement the outer fabric. And for the stripes, I used green and white jacquard to match with the holiday theme. Each strip was 3 inches wide, including the 1/2-inch seam allowances. The gold brocade cuff was cut double the width so that it could be folded under to finish the inside of the sleeve. Sew up the sleeves together, press the seams, then attach the sleeves to the robe. Once you finish the outer wonsam, cut and sew your lining pieces exactly the same as the outer sleeves, but without the stripes. Next, we are going to sew the two fabrics together, right sides facing each other, so that the unfinished raw edges get sandwiched inside when we turn the wonsam right side out. A quick patterning tip. If you cut the lining pieces slightly smaller along the sides and ends, when you turn your pieces out and iron, the outer fabric should fold over neatly towards the inside. Once you finish the body of the wonsam, hand stitch the outer sleeve cuff to the lining, careful not to pick up the outside of the fabric. At this point, I still had to finish the collar and chima, or skirt, but a huge wave of sewcrastination hit me. And I decided, wouldn't it be amazing if I sewed Ivy and her partner some stockings to fill with little gifts when they came over? And I spent way too much time sewing these adorable, stupid things. But they turned out so cute, right? So it was worth it. Now, I was getting down to the wire on time, and I almost made a huge mistake dealing with the collar. I thought, hey, this is about the width of my neck. This should be fine. Luckily, I stopped myself from impulsively cutting my almost finished wonsam, which most definitely would have reduced me to tears, and took a minute to measure my reference image again. I decided to cut out a paper collar pattern and fold it to the correct measurements and got a much narrower triangle. Disaster avoided. Once I was happy with the placement of the triangle along the center front, I basted along the edge to both secure the outer fabric to the lining and mark where I would cut away the excess. Right now you might be thinking, this looks awful. Fiddly, and you'd be correct. Using this lovely brocade might be a treat for the eyes, but it's a nightmare to manage. Anyway, it's all okay, don't worry, because we are going to be sandwiching the collar around this raw edge, so no one else will have to suffer. To make the collar, you will need a rectangle with slightly tapered ends. It's a bit hard to see in my original reference image, but you can see the shape more clearly here. When I saw this wonsam, I definitely fell in love with the sheer silk fabric, And now I'm definitely going to have to make a summery, gossamer version too. Anyway, I reinforced the collar pieces with fusible interfacing and sewed the outer and lining pieces together along the straight edge. And then ironed the curved edges inward. Along the center front edges, sandwich the wonsam into the collar, then carefully sandwich the collar around the back neck, catching only a quarter of the edge. Pin the rest of the collar so that it tapers to the center front. This is definitely a fiddly bit, so take your time to make the transition smooth. Lastly, hand sew the collar in place. I used a blind hem stitch so no stitches would show. Last but most importantly, we need to add the dongjang, or the white lining on the collar. The dongjang is a defining feature of Korean hanbok. Its crisp angles create a beautiful contrast with the gentler, organic shape of the overall silhouette. And it also serves to protect the collar from the oils on the wearer's neck. Normally, paper is added to create an even stiffer collar, but my collar was already so stiff that I opted not to add that extra layer. At this point, all I had left was the chima, or skirt that is worn under the wonsam. It's defined as a skirt, but it wraps around the bust, more like an empire line dress. This has always made me want to do a mashup of Regency-inspired hanbok, like a Korean noblewoman found herself in England year 1811 with a suitcase full of Korean silks and just sews herself a season's worth of empire evening gowns. The construction is fairly simple. Literally, a large rectangle is pleated to a band. I used a matching red jacquard along with an organza layer to soften the brightness of the fabric. While I hemmed these skirt pieces, I wanted to chat about why making this wonsam grew to mean so much to me. I am Korean American, but as I've gotten older, it's always been a question on my mind what it means to be Korean American. I've always felt connected with my culture through my South Korean family, but now that I've moved to a different state from them, I feel quite isolated. Subtle things like never speaking Korean to someone or not being able to laugh about certain odd cultural misunderstandings really add up to a feeling of otherness. Luckily, this project has been a fun new way to learn more about my Korean history and connect me to my Korean heritage and culture. It's been surprisingly empowering to find a way that combines my love of sewing with my Korean identity. I feel that this has opened up a new chapter of self-discovery that will definitely lead to more historical Korean sewing projects. And that is the end of my TED Talk. Thank you for listening. After pleating the skirt, I cut out a band to attach it to. You could simply cut out a rectangle and call it a day, but I chose to round the areas that would sit under the arms to make it a little more comfortable to wear. I sandwiched a layer of organza to match the skirt and then sewed the top edge of the band closed before turning it right sides out. Oh my gosh, we're so close. After ironing all the seams open and the lining layer flat, all there is left to do is sew the right side of the pleated skirt to the band, then hand stitch the lining to finish. I'm so proud of how this ensemble turned out. It feels just right for the holidays. The way the fabric glitters in the sunlight. I can't help but swish around the fantastically large sleeves. Before I end the video, I want to talk about why I styled my outfit in a non-historical way. Traditionally, the wonsam would have been closed via a belt or embroidered patch called a hyungbae, but instead, I chose to wear it slightly open. Honestly, I thought it looked cuter that way, like a Christmas present. My personal style ethos is that I wear these clothes that I make for fun. I don't believe 100% historical accuracy is necessary for a good time. Anyway, I think my feelings of historical accuracy could be an entirely other video. So for now, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!